Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Honest Youth Pastor YouTube channel, the channel that helps believers use biblical discernment in all aspects of life. Today, we are going to do another video about a post that I made today over on Instagram to break it down a little bit. I think these have been helpful to you guys. Hopefully, they have been helpful to you. Here in just a minute, I'm actually going to bring on somebody, John Root. You may have heard of him and seen some of the stuff online to kind of talk about this topic a little bit more. But before we get to that conversation, I do want to talk a little bit and sort of preface this with a bit of why this, I think, is a conversation worth having. I am in a very conservative state. I know a lot of people that follow probably are as well. And one of the things I've noticed since way back when in 2016 is a slow and steady sort of fan base for Trump. Now, again, I don't have an issue with that at all. In fact, I think there's a lot of things that people can rally behind, and there's a lot of good things people can rally behind. Today on Instagram, I made I screenshotted a tweet of James White where he said, hey, there's sort of this issue that I see happening about there's sort of a Trump cult occurring within Christianity. And he said, hey, I just sort of want to call it out. And I just retweeted that with 100% I agree. And then I made it a reel and I popped it on Instagram with a song by, I forget, I think her name's like Natasha Owens or something. I don't know. You can go over to Instagram and see it. The point being is that there is a culture of people that are really, really big fans of Trump. And then there are people that I define today on Instagram as MAGA heads. Now, let me describe to you what that term means, right? So you've heard of like metal heads, right? These are people that are not just fans of metal music. Their entire world revolves around metal music. They know all the bands, they know all the history, they have all the shirts, they attend all the concerts, like they are in it. You know who they are because that is basically their whole identity. Same thing with maybe some of you guys that grew up and are about the same age as me. You know people that are Potterheads, right? These are Harry Potter super fans. These are the people that literally dress up to go to Universal Studios. They go and they drink the butterbeer. They go and they have the wands. Like these are Potter. They are all engulfed into the world of Harry Potter. And you have a lot of super fandoms in a lot of different places. And so when I was trying to come up with the name of what do I call these people that are obsessed with Donald Trump, what would be a good fitting name? MAGA heads. I think that's a perfect name because these are the people that have the shirts, have the flags, have all of like socks with Donald Trump's face on them. Like they are in it for the long haul. Now, I think that obviously there is a subculture of those people that aren't Christians, and that's a whole different conversation to have with those people about sort of what they're doing and the allegiance and sort of the idolatry that they have that they don't even know. But this channel doesn't cover really that. We're talking about believers within this sort of world of politics and what that looks like. And so specifically what I'm looking at is believers that follow Christ, but still have sort of this really huge personality really built up around Donald Trump. Now, this isn't about Donald Trump. I don't want you to get confused about this video. We could have a whole nother video talking about Trump himself, but I'm talking about the people that sort of make their whole identity about him. And I just want to give a few examples that were sent over, and then one specific one we'll end with about that happened at the conference. So this is just one of them, right? This is just a small, simple example of it's time for America to turn back to God. And we have Donald Trump with the clearly AI image of Jesus on the cross on his chest. And we're going to take that one. And then here's another one. Donald Trump himself apparently retweeted this one of him and Jesus in a courtroom. And we'll talk about that probably here in a little bit. Then we have this one right here, which is just Franklin Graham from 2016. Now, granted, this is a long time ago. Maybe Franklin doesn't necessarily use this word usage anymore, but this idea of thinking of Donald Trump like Moses or a David of a generation. And then we have this one here, which really made the rounds, which is Donald Trump's face on unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. That one sort of made the rounds on Twitter. Now, the point of showing these is to demonstrate that maybe, again, this conversation isn't about Trump as much as it is about followers that really are like, this is the dude, this is the guy, we're putting everything behind him. We like everything he says is gospel and we cannot disagree with him. And you may say, well, that's not true. Well, the reality is that is sort of true. In fact, at the conference, Jack Graham tweeted out at the end of the Republican National Convention, it has been a privilege to participate in a historic and epic political local convention that on a number of occasions felt like a spiritual movement. If you love God and country, this was a never to be forgotten experience. So I just want to point that out, right? This is the idea, just to sort of think through this process of, hey, there is a group of believers out here that are like all in on Trump. Now, again, I just want to distinguish right before I bring John on here. We're going to go kind of back and forth and have a conversation here just about this subject. I want to distinguish, as I tried to in my Instagram post today, that there are people that are obviously conservatives. I think I would be very okay to be fit in that camp. Conservatives that want to be actively involved in our local communities and our local governments to move forward in a way that is beneficial for the society and the people that we live with in society in ways that are biblically facing, that benefit everyone. I think that's a separate camp than people that are all in on Trump, and he is the one that he is the savior of all of the conservative values. This is the people that have the shirts, the socks, the hats, the flags, that put the little fake bandage on their ear, right? They're all in. This is super fans, right? And having a conversation with those people that are that, as well as Christian. And I think that is a larger group than most people would be comfortable being like, oh no, it's a fringe thing. I think it is kind of fringe, but there's a bigger group of people that the more you talk to them, their language starts to demonstrate that there is this real issue that they feel like if Trump doesn't win, everything's on the train to hell real fast. And I think some of that is legitimate. We'll probably talk about this in this conversation with John. So let's bring John Root on, and we'll have a little bit of this conversation. I think it's going to be beneficial because originally I was just going to go kind of on this rant about sort of what I see. And John reached out, and I think this will be a helpful conversation because he's been in this world a whole lot more than me. A lot of you over on Instagram have been like, hey, you're the meme guy, make the memes. And I'm like, okay, I don't know a lot about politics, but I do see an issue that I think needs to be addressed. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it with John because I think John has been in that world for quite a while, seen a lot more of it. John, thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it.
What's up, brother? Hey, yeah, it kind of reminds me of when people are just like, you are the monkey. You're supposed to dance for us, monkey. This is a meme circus, and that's what we're supposed to get from you. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to dive into this. I've had some conversations with other people, including John Clash. I love the work that he's done. He wrote a great book about the law of attraction that he fell into. And, you know, he covers politics and stuff too. But it's not just we like this Trump guy and we don't like where the country's going. It's no, we will follow this guy to the ends of the earth. And there's a lot of messianic language that's being used in his promo videos. And a lot of influencers are kind of pushing back on Christians that are saying, just don't really think this is what we should be doing.
Yeah, let's go to that really quick because I think that'll be interesting. And just for you guys that are watching, we haven't talked about anything we're going to talk about, so this could go everywhere, just basically wherever my brain wants to take it, which is a scary place sometimes in my head. So let's talk about that briefly because, so for example, I think it's fair to say that a majority of people that are not super politically involved did not watch every session of the Republican National Convention. I didn't. I basically saw the highlights online. I know other people in my family didn't even know what happened this week. They didn't even know what's going on. And so everybody's sort of coming at this at a different level of interest or even knowledge of what's happening. I know, for example, you're talking about people pushing back on Christians a little bit. I saw a lot of that whenever people were bringing up, for example, I think her name is Amber Rose, spoke at the conference, this idea of sort of putting people in front that would not have previously sort of fit more of the Republican sort of image base, but they're putting them forward because I think the Republicans sort of see that if we're going to get votes, we need to appeal to sort of a broader audience here in order to do that. And then some people that I guess we're now Puritans or purist is what I think is being referred to, that are saying, yeah, but there's a bit of an issue here because you're broadening so far out, and now because we're saying we don't want to do that, now there's some pushback. And I think some of that sort of crosses over. There's some Christians that would say, I'm a Christian, but I agree that we should go this way. So do you see that? What do you see happening sort of within that? A little bit of a wrestle, I feel like, within the party, just from a distance. Again, I'm not in it.
And then I think we've both seen online that anytime that we bring up what you put in the first part of this video was, guys, like if you're saying that Jesus is with Trump in the courtroom, that when he's going under these trials during Lent, you're trying to compare him to what Jesus went through. And then, there's 34 counts that he gets pushed on him. And it's just like, Jesus was found guilty too. This is everything we've seen at the RNC is on top of that. So it's like already they believe that this is, God's chosen in a sense. People are using that kind of language. Politicians like Lauren Boebert are pushing that. Obviously, there's the Faith Advisory Council that Trump had around him that truly believe, like Paula White is just like, this guy is Nehemiah, is a Davidic figure. So when you see things like this, like Amber Rose, it's like, all right, they're pushing this big tent thing. No one's saying that Amber Rose picking Trump over Biden is objectively the wrong vote. I mean, for me, it's just like, we can't have Biden anymore. But we can bring up that this person is a legitimate porn star. They're totally for abortion at will, has said that Jesus was a cult leader. So she's
I saw that clip.
She's brought that up.
I saw that clip, yeah.
And people are pushing back and they're like, yeah, I just don't. Thankfully, she's voting for Trump and denouncing Biden. But let's get to the foundation here. What message are we sending? Are you sending a message that, what our tent is so big that we want to go so low to try to get her followers somehow? So we're going to platform porn stars. It doesn't make sense. Matt Walsh got a lot of pushback. And unfortunately, last thing I'll say on this little rant is the Republican Party obviously is not Christian. Conservatism doesn't equal Christianity. We can cover that all day long, and hopefully people watching this know that. But when we talk about traditional values that are most of the time rooted in Scripture, like marriage, the Republican Party has said, forget it. Like, marriage is no longer between one man and one woman. I know God defined it. Times have changed. We're going to redefine it. And at the same time, you have people like Eric Trump that are saying that him, his wife, Laura Trump, that is the co-chair of the RNC, and Donald Trump, they are on board with the language that the holes in the roof are immigration and inflation and crime, and then spots on the wall that we shouldn't really worry about right now are things like abortion. So like when we come to the table, we're like, hey, as Christians, we want to see the very best Trump we can possibly get, the very best Republican Party we can get, because they're going down a slippery slope. And if we give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And if you forget God, it's going to be a really difficult thing to implement godly values and traditional values back into the platform.
Yeah. On that, so that's a great segue to, I guess, really, I don't want to forget to cover this, which is this whole idea of, I think everybody knows, at least my comment section is full of this phrase: conservatism doesn't equal Christianity. And I think we both, like, we of course would say that. I've said that a number of times. I think people get sort of lost in the sauce, though, when we start talking about it that way, because then it just becomes like, well, because it's not, conservatism isn't Christianity, then just anything goes then. And so there's just sort of this idea that I really think, and again, I'm not super involved in politics, guys. Like, I'm outside just looking in, basically. But what it seems to happen is that the Republican National Convention has basically taken the tactics of the Democrats and said, like, as long as it's not this guy, like, as long as it's not Biden, we'll take whatever we can get, which was the whole vote for Biden campaign, which is like, he's not Trump, so vote for him. I mean, that was the whole thing. Nobody was a big fan of Biden. It's just, at least he wasn't Trump. And so it seems like they're taking that same page and they're saying, well, hey guys, at least it's not Biden. And so just take what you can get, right? And I think as believers, and I've sort of seen this struggle in the comment section of people saying, like, they know that the stances have changed within the Republican Party. They know the whole, like, the marriage thing it's completely gotten rid of the language of man and woman marriage. It's gotten rid of the language of as far as gender, like sort of male and female, and the homosexuality language. And it's gotten rid of the staunchly, like, pro-life language and made it a whole lot more gray. And so what it leaves people with is now they're like, yeah, but like what now? Like I'm stuck now. Like, and which is a lot of people have perceived, at least the posts that I've been making, as sort of a either don't vote mentality or like a, like, what do you want us to do then? And so I think this is where the wrestle comes in for Christians. We have not been used to having to use our brains when it comes to politics, because in reality, I grew up, I don't know how everybody else grew up, but I grew up with this idea that if you just vote Republican, and that's just like, that's the Christian vote. And we haven't had to actually engage in thought and use our brains and our Christian discernment to say, well, how do I navigate this well? And I think it's led us to this point to where we're like, well, we know conservatism isn't Christianity, but what do we do when the party that was supposed to be conservative doesn't conserve anything? Like, what do we do? And I'll say this, and I want to kind of pick your brain on this. I think what that does mean for Christians, which some people aren't going to like because it's going to sound like Christian nationalism, is that Christians should be incredibly involved and active in politics. Like, the idea is that Christians, when we see this, should, like, a red flag should go up, and we should be like, maybe I should get like on the school board. Maybe I should run for town council. Maybe I should like be involved in. And then we're going to face a whole other thing of like this whole, well, you're a Christian nationalist idea. But I mean, would you say, what is the solution then? Like, would you agree, disagree on that? Like, what's the solution to fix this issue that obviously has happened because we haven't used our brains very well over the past, I don't know, couple decades?
Multiple things. Number one, people always bring up the same talking points of, I'm voting for a commander in chief, not a pastor.
Hear that
not
a lot.
Pastor in chief. And it's just, for some reason, Christians have been told that because they believe the lie of separation of church and state, that somehow that God shouldn't be involved in government if the state's not going to be involved in the church. And I don't know how you can call yourself a Christian and then say, I can separate my faith from the direction that our country should go. And I know I brought that up when it comes to the whole Ephesians 6:11 thing. Trump got shot at 6:11. So do you know what Ephesians 6:11 says? It's like, all right, why didn't you pick Genesis 6:11? Why didn't you pick Numbers? Like any of these things? It's like, no, you're this is eisegesis. You're picking something that is not the context of the scripture, and it's an abuse of the text, and you throw that out there. And people somehow have believed that Trump and the Republicans, just because Biden and the left are so evil, it's not really a lesser of two evil things. They might believe that. And if they do, it's like, okay, the lesser of two evils is my friend. The lesser of two evils is the person that will take care of me. The lesser of two evils is
I've seen that exact tweet. I've seen that exact tweet online. Yeah.
And it's really, really silly because, especially when it comes to, I don't know what I can say on YouTube, especially when it comes to like abortion. I want to be careful. I don't know.
All they're going to do is put a little thing at the bottom. They'll put a little deal like abortion means this. It just go ahead. It's whatever.
But I mean, that is the biggest evil of our society. And if people are literally telling you this is not a big deal at all, that we no longer really want to eradicate abortion, and they're telling you to compromise on your faith, this is literally a scheme of the devil. I think the devil is working through the Republican Party to allow Christians to believe that, you should sit on the sidelines here. It is better to have a big tent. It is better to have porn stars on stage. It is better to have prayers to a false god at the Republican National Convention. And then also at the same time, we're at this place of, yeah, people are asking you, they're asking me, how do we vote? What do we do here? There's times where I just really can't give answers. But I know for sure, it's like, I'm never, ever suggesting vote for Biden or the Democrats. I mean, I think they are completely gone. I would never, ever suggest that. But what I always tell people is, again, I go back to, if Trump is going to be the guy, and we want to get our country back on track economically, we want to get our country back on track when it comes to safe streets and a safe border and respected by different countries and nations across the world. At the same time, if we see that reports that there Grindr is saying that the Republican National Convention is like its Super Bowl. And people, if you don't know what Grindr is, it's literally just a gay hookup app.
I
And
didn't know that was an article that was written. That's crazy.
crazy part when we do a live, Michael, like we get to bring up stuff. It's like, whoa, we didn't talk about that. I mean, things like this. This is where the party is going. It is literally pushing a repackaged diversity, equity, and inclusion. People have to realize that. And just because we push back against that as Christians doesn't mean that we need everybody to be perfect in order to be platformed by the RNC. No, first and foremost, we serve God, and we want to see our elected officials that we have a right and a privilege to vote in, who should be subservient to what we want as the people. But also that doesn't mean that it is mob rule. So if the vast majority of people want abortion, we know objectively that is a human being. And every human being deserves life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if the party that we somehow align with as Christians is not standing up to those objective moral values established by God, there's nothing wrong with pushing back. But when it comes to how people should vote, I'll never tell people this is exactly what you should do. I mean, I will for sure say like something that you shouldn't do is vote for Biden, though. I don't believe that is going to be the best way to go and honoring to God in that sense. But that also doesn't mean that voting for the right somehow gets you some kudos with God. Like you're going to hear, well done, good and faithful conservative when you go upstairs.
So let's get on that, because I think that's very important. So like again, the interesting thing about having a live is things that come up. So like I'm in the same boat as you. I'm never going to tell anybody how to vote. My goal with this YouTube channel, with the Instagram page, all of it is just to make you think. I don't think it's super hard to figure out where I land, even though I have been called a liberal at least twice today. But in general, I don't think it's very hard to figure out where I land. And I would fit in the same boat as you. This idea of like voting for Biden is just sort of insane if you're a Christian, to hold to Jesus's way of living, the way of life. I don't see how you could vote for Biden at all. On that note, though, I think we have come to, and I think you really kind of touched on this a little bit. We've come to a point within Christianity where now, used to, I think people, and this is just sort of my perception growing up within teenage and college years, the perception was you just vote Republican and then just assume that they're going to take care of everything. And now Christians, I think, and we got a little taste of this when we saw it on Twitter, that when Christians within the party say, yeah, but there's this huge pushback. And so now I think Christians are in a position, whether you like it or not, this is where you're at, is that you're going to have to grow a pretty big backbone and develop fairly thick skin, because if you're going to be in the party that you're like, well, this is heading in a generally okay direction with a whole bunch of issues attached to it, and you start saying that, you are going to get pushback from the people that you're generally in the same boat with, because you're pushing on issues that they want to be big tent issues. I mean, the other day, this was the craziest thing. I have a whole video on it if somebody wants to go watch it. But like the idea that Christians were like, we need to respect it when a sheik prays, because they're just praying to their understanding of who God is. And I'm like, bro, time out. What in the world? Like, have you read the Bible? God's not super cool with any of that. And so though the Republican National Convention is not a Christian, organization, as Christians in an organization, there is this duty to stand up and say, yeah, but there is a one true God over here, and this isn't it. And to be able to have enough wherewithal and conviction to say that, much as I would assume, and I think, like you said, this idea of separation of church and state comes in a lot like it has just with separation of my belief and in my life, is that you can't really, as a Christian, live your life without your belief system overflowing into the conversations you have, whether that be at work or with family or with friends. The same thing happens with your political party. You can't be a part of a political party with all of this nonsense happening and just say, well, it's better than the other guy. when reality is everybody can see that the Republican Party right now is just 10 years behind the Democratic Party, because really at the end of the day, all they're looking for is votes, and they're going to do whatever they can to get a vote. And you're going to, if you're a Christian that sees the issues within the party, you're going to have to grow a backbone, and you're going to have to be okay with people calling you names that you know you're not, and you're going to have to like push forward and maybe lose a few friends in the process, or at least have some contentious conversations to be able to say, I'm not okay with ever you saying that killing a baby is okay. I don't care if you're telling me it's super early or where your line is super late. There's never okay on that spectrum. And to be able to stand up and keep pushing for that. Again, I'm sure me and Dusty Devers have some issue, like some different theological issues, and I'm sure, you know, I'm known for not lining up with anybody. But the point is, that dude has a backbone and is stating conviction without apology to try to push forward this idea of like, who I am is a Christian, and it affects everything I do. And I think you've seen that, especially when you've posted online, pushback from other Christians that are like, yeah, just let it be though. Like, just let it be so we can get somebody elected and then we'll deal with it. And it's just like, yeah, but the house is burning down like right now though, guys. Like, I can't put it out later. So what's your idea of that as far as Christians and the way, because I know you've dealt with this, you've probably have some tips on that. How can Christians best deal with this sort of pushback from people they love and they admire, while they're also pushing on this real reality of like, I see a bunch of issues in the party that I want to see sort of succeed?
It kind of reminds me of like high school student government, where you always have people running for these offices and they bring up these like grand plans. And then it's just like, yeah, that sounds awesome if lunch period could go 10 minutes longer. And then like, it never happens. And then if for some reason Christians believe in a version of that, where it's like, well, Trump helped overturn Roe v. Wade. So like, I know that he's pro-life. I don't really like what he's saying, but we have to get to this mindset of, as Christians, they are telling us exactly where they're at, and their moral compass is totally compromised. 100%. Like, they're not on a straight and narrow true north. And for some reason, Christians, and I'm not going to try to, I hate to maybe come across like I'm painting a broad brush, but non-denominational Christianity. I'm not going to try to say just because I'm on the reform side, it's like the reform guys are just doing everything right. But I think non-denominational Christianity kind of helps push this tolerant, lukewarm Christianity that, you know, pushes things like love the sinner, hate the sin, as if the sin and the sinner are separated. You need to kind of just be tolerant of our government leaders. So when they tell you to shut down your church during COVID, you might not like it, but kind of submit to the authorities. And then if your chosen Republican Party is telling you this is what we need to do right now, kind of just be tolerant and kind of accept it. People literally just love to be governed. And for some reason, they are submitting to Trump and the Republican Party more than they're submitting to Christ. And that's what we're trying to bring up as Christians. We're not out here shaming people and saying that I hope Amber Rose goes straight to hell. No, we hope that she comes to know Christ and submits to Christ. We hope the same thing happens with Trump. And that's what a lot of people like to think now, that even bringing up the idea of, I got one more thought after this ramble, is if you believe, and this would be a totally different tangent, if you believe that God somehow intervened, you know, kind of nudged the bullet away from Trump a little bit, I think it leads you down this road that somehow, you know, God does really anoint Trump or has anointed Trump. And he is supposed to be that guy that we see on the billboard and in the ads that are just like, he will not leave us nor forsake us. And they don't have the biblical literacy and discernment to understand that this kind of language should not be used for this guy. We can like some of his policies. I have myself, and I'm happy to say, like, I voted for the guy twice. I think he was better than the options that we had over the last few elections. But there's still some things I will always push back on. And I think people really should understand that the church as a whole is not ready for this pushback we are getting from the Republican Party, the Republican media, and the influential figures within the Republican and conservative side of things. We fell asleep and COVID hit, and we were not prepared. BLM stuff hit, we were not prepared. And then now we're having people that we seemingly aligned with on the political side of things in a lot of ways, because the Democrat Party has totally forsaken God, and we're asleep at the wheel and we don't know how to push back. And we've been told so long that the Democrats are just so evil. So anything on the other side of that, even if it's really toeing the line on the spectrum of how we should vote, how we should engage politically, it's somehow righteous. And I think that's why 100% we need solid Christian leaders like Jack Hibbs. We definitely disagree theologically on some stuff, but I like Jack in a lot of ways. And I know he's pushed back on some stuff, but people look to people like him and other pastors that would be considered really heavily involved in politics. And they just say, Biden needs to be gone. But at the same time, as Christians, we are called to stand up for righteousness and stand firm in God's word. And if we're being told that we just need to shut up about it for the next few months, which could turn into the next 4 years, which could turn into the remainder of however God allows this country to go, to say, we didn't talk about the slippery slope and now we're completely gone. We're completely godless. And because we were told to be tolerant to some of these things because it was better than the left, God has totally made this place under judgment. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us full circle. So we can kind of end on this topic here, which is like the whole topic of the tweet / reel, as well as the kind of the title of this video, is this like this idea of the cult of Trump. Again, I think a lot of people assume, and I think it's probably they assume this because of the language of like, Christian nationalism and whatnot, that like if you have a Trump hat or a Trump shirt, you're part of the cult. I tried to clarify that as much as possible. I don't think people understood the original point. Sometimes I just don't word things well. I'll take the blame on that. But clarifying it here for sure.
There can be no nuance, Michael. Nuance is a thing of the past. No.
So here's the thing. I think the difference between, and I use this analogy in a couple explanations I told to people, and hopefully it tracks here as well, is that there's a huge difference between me saying that I'm a fan of a band and having a shirt because like I went to a concert once. It's a totally different thing for me to like have the shirt, have all the tour posters, have every album they ever made, like know their favorite color, their birthday, everything about them. Like that's a different level of fandom than me just saying, hey, I like the music and I like, I enjoy them. And I think that's the difference between conservatives and the MAGA heads, is this idea that conservatives go like, I like the policies, I like the direction, I have some issues here, and here, and I'm going to tell you about them because I'm not going to just jump on board because of who you are, but like I like some of these things and I'm going to push on the other things, versus the people that are like, two flags hanging from the back of the truck, big old hat. You can't tell me Trump did anything wrong. He's the biggest boss in the world. Like he is the God King. And so I think what we have to do, especially as believers, to other believers, as we're interacting with other believers, is be able to distinguish and say, okay, like what you just said, we cannot just sit back and go along to get along on some of these issues just so it's not the Democrats running the country. There's a difference. And I think the interesting part here is even some non-believers seeing this. I saw an interview from Mark Zuckerberg today where he's like I don't even like Trump, but the dude standing up with the fist up, like that was very patriotic. And he was like, I got a little emotional about it. And I think people see like this idea of like this the love for country and patriotism. And I think for Christians there's this real like tension here where we can say, our home is not here, but we are here to do good works and interact with the society we're in. And so we live in this holy tension of saying like, I like these policies, but I'm going to hold you to account on these other things you're wrong on. because I know this, this is the better way to go, and not just go all in just simply because it's not Biden. And I unfortunately have talked to a ton of Christians that are all in on Trump just because he's not Biden. And they aren't addressing the issues that you've talked about as far as the marriage thing, as far as the abortion thing, being the primary two that have been changed. But a lot of the other things too, as far as some of the language he uses, some of the statements he's made, right? They're just like, it's fine. It's no big deal. At least it's not Biden. And I think as Christians, we can't just lump into the cult because we're like, well, it's not that. Like, I have this feeling that some of the people that I've talked to and some of the conversations I've had lean this direction with what I would consider cultural Christians, that all they just want a better economy. They just don't want to talk about transgenderism all the time, and they want it to be like it was in the 90s. And it's like, guys, like, that is not the end goal. that is not the paradise you're looking for. There's a better life to be found in Jesus, and a better country to be had if we pursue him. And they're settling for what, again, I don't want to get into the whole Trump topic, but I think what just the general Republican convention is trying to sell them on, like, hey, at least we're not over here. And I think as Christians, and we both have probably dealt with this, we've got to stand up and say, look, I like these policies. There's a lot of stuff I like here, but there's a lot of stuff I don't either. And to have the wherewithal and the backbone for Christians, like you said, I think what 2020 really revealed was that Christians don't know their doctrine. They don't know theology very well, and they will go along just so that, just don't be mad at me. I'll just do whatever it takes so you're not mad at me. And we really are coming to a crossroads where Christians have to say, look, I'm with you this far but no further, and I'm going to hold you to account on these other things. And I'm not going to just let you do whatever you want. I'm going to be loud about it. And I think it really goes back to a little bit as what we see in the New Testament and the early church writings, where these Christians were involved. Obviously, it's a different political structure, but they were involved in their communities, and they were involved in what's even more ironic is that they didn't even have voting rights, but they were changing their communities just by the way they lived. And I think and getting a lot of pushback for it. And so one of the things I think we have to do as modern day Christians is not just lump in, with the cult of Trump, just because, like, oh, he's the dude, look at him, I've never seen such a strong leader. And I'm like, there's a discussion to be had there about, I think, and I'll say this and I'll shoot it over to you, this will be the last thing I say. I think that Christians have been so devoid of strong leadership for so long that when you see somebody that does stand on their principles and values, even if you don't agree with all of them, you'll follow them because you see no leaders anywhere else. And so you'll just follow the one guy that is saying something that's louder than everybody else and doesn't seem to back down. Because that's what I hear from people all the time with Trump. Well, he stands on his values. He doesn't back down. He can't be bought. And that's what people are looking for. They just don't see it within the Christian community. So they're going to go find it in somebody else.
Yeah. Number one, we can come together and say, we are glad that Trump is alive. Thank God that he is alive. I'm not going to believe that that God intervened in that situation. That's not where I fall doctrinally. And obviously, thoughts and prayers go out to the firefighter's family. But it somehow gets people into this. Trump has been provided some form of deity. And there is forms of Christian nationalism that kind of align with like New Apostolic Reformation stuff. And we can get into all that stuff in another video at another time. Mm-hmm. But it's not just simply we like his policies and believe that he is an objectively better option than Biden. It's no, we need to deify this guy. And that's an issue because I think people are starting to idolize him and have idolized him. And I think there are a lot of problematic church leaders that are pushing that stuff. Number two, people need to read Daniel. Daniel never assimilated in Babylon. He was in exile in a foreign land, and that's where we're at as Christians. We're going down this road of we look more and more like Babylon, and the left has been pushing it on us. The media has been pushing on us. Progressive Christianity has been pushing on us. And now the Republican Party and its top leaders are telling us you need to assimilate. You need to separate yourself from your faith at times, or completely separate your faith from these political issues and assimilate. Daniel allowed his name to be changed because he didn't believe that that was, a foundational thing that like, I won't let you do it. But it's like, no, this is my diet. I am going to continue to pray, and, God's going to do whatever he wants with me, but I'm not going to assimilate to this culture. I'm not going to bow down to the idols. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people bowing down to the idols. And the final thing here is, as we continue to push forward as Christians, yes, we need to be doctrinally sound. We need to be biblically literate, and we need to understand theology a lot more. So when we bring up the Ephesians 6:11 stuff and numerology, people just don't know. They're like, I don't get it. Like, people are looking into the Bible and they're looking to God. It's like, yeah, I can say like, people are using Christ as King irreverently. So, but I can still say, I'm happy that phrase is used, but there also should be a reverence behind it. If Ephesians 6:11 is being used, it needs to be faithful to the text and honoring to Christ and point people to Christ, not a political party or a political candidate. So when we have these things that are going on that are objectively problematic when it comes to marriage, abortion, the tone and language that is used with stuff, we can push back and say, yes, we believe this is better than the left. We believe this is better than Biden, but I want to hold our leaders accountable to God and his word. It's so funny that people say, stop pushing your religion on us, when you're literally pushing a religion on us. Like, you have a specific cultural, political worldview that you're telling us that we need to adopt and separate it from our foundational faith. So hopefully it's an encouragement to people that not everybody that is with Trump, who's going to vote for Trump, is in the cult. Of course, I'm not saying that. I know you're not saying that. But there is times, if you believe that you need to silence your faith and compromise on your faith for this man or for this party, you might start realizing that I've now idolized Donald Trump, and I am now maybe, frankly, in a cult.
Yeah. And that hopefully, again, that clears up a little bit. I think a lot of what you said there at the end is great. We could honestly do a whole nother hour just on biblical literacy. But I think a huge breakdown of why we're at where we're at really does revolve around that, and the desire to have a leader and not having one, and not understanding even how to find one, and then so just latching on to whatever. So yeah, not everybody, just in this video to clarify, not everybody that has a shirt or a flag or a hat is in the cult, but there is a conversation I think each of us need to have with ourselves and with others within our faith community about how far is too far here when it gets to the point of identifying with ideology versus idolizing a person just because they're doing all the heavy lifting for you and you're not having to think a lot yourself. And I think part of it is Christians are going to have to find out real quick, again, for like the fifth time in the last 6 years, that you're going to have a backbone, and you're going to have to stand up, and you're going to have to be okay with people disagreeing with you, and you're going to have to learn to have hard conversations in a civil way to where you can stand on your faith and say, no, this is why I hold to what I hold. And a lot of that comes back to like what we've already talked about as far as understanding what the text says, understanding how to read the text, understanding how to communicate your beliefs in a way that others can understand, and that you even understand while you're doing it. So hopefully, again, we'll probably have to do another video on that as well. Every time I talk to you, I tell you it's going to be this long, and it's always longer. So we'll have to make another time to do that.
We're both long-winded. We love to talk.
But guys, hopefully that is a little helpful, right? I'm not saying you're in a cult just because you have a shirt, but I think there is a line that if you can't ever disagree with anyone, whether it be a political party or a politician or even a pastor, if there's no pushback or disagreement, there's an issue there, and you really need to think about why you don't see that, because there's usually something wrong there. So hopefully, guys, that was helpful. If it was, make sure to leave a like. If you think somebody would benefit from this, as always, share it, and I'll talk to you next time. John, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, see you guys later.